We're the Cavaliers.
Good morning, Bellows Falls. We're live here on the feed.
We're live. We got busy
And we're-
chatting ahead of time.
We've got
so we
busy
didn't do
chatting
our usual
again.
prep.
It's June 13th. And in 1966, the Supreme Court made the Miranda decision in June.
You always
So
have
you
some
have the
little
right to
trivia.
remain silent, Marty.
Yeah, I think the person that needs to remain silent today is probably going to be Mike.
I know.
Because I can
Might
already
get the
tell.
clapper, I
And I
bet.
didn't get the clacker out.
All right, so here we are today. We have our guest is Tom Fontaine. He's going to be talking about his new book out here in just a little bit. But first, Marty's going to go over some local events because it's the big alumni
Big
weekend.
alumni weekend. We actually, Ben Mashur was going to come in and join us this morning, but he had some work conflicts. So I'm going to give the rundown on alumni weekend, which if anyone everyone always says, oh, when is alumni weekend? It's pretty much traditionally Father's Day weekend. It's kind of the same weekend every year. They did have to change it one year. But
Snow
bylaws.
days.
No, they changed it Father's Day, the way that things
Oh.
fell. It didn't actually happen on Father's Day weekend.
All right.
So it starts on Friday, and the very first event is kind of a new event for the Alumni Association, is the Alumni Golf Tournament, which is up at the Country Club. I know the numbers the past few years have been kind of small with the golf tournament, but I know people that have gone to it, and they said it's a great event, great way to kick off the weekend. Then we have the traditional dances on Friday night. There's one at the Waypoint Center, and then there's one at the Legion. Both dances are from 8 to midnight. At the Waypoint Center, we have version 6 playing, and at the Legion, it's Illusion.
Illusion. Oh, yeah. They're a band back in the 60s.
Well, they play 60s kind of music.
But they
It's
first
Sean-
formed in the 60s.
Probably, yeah. And then on Saturday, this is, again, is a new event for the Alumni Association. They're trying to expand it out into more events all weekend. They do alumni games. So any alumni can come back, and there'll be organized basketball, soccer, and field hockey, mixed classes. Anyone can participate. That's been, again, something that they were trying to grow, but I think they're getting more participation in that. And then Sunday is the traditional alumni parade, starting at 1 o'clock in the north end of town, going down Atkinson Street all the way around to the square. And this year's, the whole weekend is actually dedicated to Mike Hardy this year.
Oh, really? That's nice.
He passed away. And then to finish off the weekend will be the annual meeting of the Alumni Association at the Bellows Falls Middle School at 4 p.m. So that's
Great.
the rundown on the alumni weekend.
Who's the Grand Marshal?
Well, that's the interesting question that we had. We were talking about my class this morning. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're dedicating the weekend to Mike Hardy in
So he
lieu
would be
of a
like an
grand
honorary.
marshal, or if there's a grand marshal in addition. I'm guessing, because I haven't seen anything else to indicate that they're in lieu of having an actual grand marshal ride through the parade, which is the traditional thing that happens, that they're dedicating the parade to Mike Hardy, the whole weekend to Mike Hardy.
That's
So
fantastic.
I'm not 100% clear on. I could be totally mistaken. There could be a grand marshal, and if there is, I apologize. I did not know. I didn't have that information ahead of time. I didn't actually see anything about it on the Facebook posts, or usually you see some announcement about it. So I'm thinking in lieu of a grand marshal this year, they decided to do a dedication.
Nice,
So
nice.
And then tonight's class night.
tonight is class night. Tomorrow night's graduation. I
Yeah.
think the weather's on track for a good graduation. Graduation to be outside, I think. Which
Right.
is,
Well, I think it's going to rain tonight, so they'll have class night.
yeah.
I
Which is
think
good.
that's normally inside anyway.
It is
right?
always
Yeah.
inside, yeah.
Yeah, and then tonight is the first ever Fact TV
Scholarship.
Suzanne Grunwald Scholarship Award. We'll be giving $1,000 to a worthy student, and then it'll be our first time ever doing that. So we're starting that. So Fact TV's moving up.
Fact TV's moving up the food chain.
Yep. All
So
right.
for that scholarship, is there a criteria for it?
Yes. The idea is it's people who will work or as part of their work will do media production, like either, and it doesn't have to be, like it. Ideally, we're thinking TV, but it could be like YouTube or even Instagram, or just ways of telling stories with digital media. And so we have a really good candidate this year who I think is going to. Because it's the first time out, the criteria was a little, I think in years ahead, people will say, "Oh, this is what they were looking for."
Yeah.
But we just happen to have a person who made a video and did some things, and so it was really pretty good. Yeah.
That's great.
In future years, we would require them to bring in or to show us their video, and it would be judged on like how much they've really worked in media, that we could see that they worked in media. This year, we couldn't get that criteria out ahead of time, so nobody knew, like, seniors that were maybe interested in media and didn't know they'd have to like present something, almost kind of like or something that to show us their interest in media production.
Do they show that video on class night?
No, there's not
there's not
enough
time.
time. They're telling us we have like 30 seconds to get up there,
Here's your
tell
award pie.
tell the story of the award and get off.
Wow.
Because they have hundreds of
Yeah,
awards,
yeah.
I guess, and so
Yeah.
they only have 2 hours to do it. So anyway,
So
moving-
Tommy,
oh, yeah, Tommy, you have a new book out.
I do.
second book I might know.
Yeah.
It is. It is. It's a cool little book. And again, the focus is on Grafton and its rich history, especially in the Civil War. And the two characters are two, I'm going to say, grade school friends that grew up in Grafton. Both of them went off to college in different colleges. So the main character, Sam, went off to Middlebury College, and Wilder, or Will, went off to Dartmouth College. They both signed on to be part of a cavalry unit, and it was primarily a unit of college students that would be protecting and looking after Washington. So President Lincoln wanted about 50,000 men to patrol around Washington area, Northern Virginia, Harper's Ferry, Winchester,
Yeah.
just to be the eyes
That's
and
great.
ears.
So were these? I sort of remember in the first book, were these characters referred to as? Because I remember he was talking about people going off to college and things like that. So were they in the first book as referenced in
They were,
Yeah.
one of them.
one of them? Yeah.
So, and I wrote this book, or started to write it, right after I wrote The Messenger Boy, so 20 some odd years ago. And
oh, really?
I researched the main character, Sam, and I mentioned him in the first book.
Yeah.
Not for the reason of pursuing another
Yeah,
book
right.
two, but book one,
just-
did pretty cool and did a nice, got the word of Grafton out there to the audiences. So Pat Jaworski, who is the editor and part of the museum, said, "Let's look at book two."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
we went
great.
from there.
And the interesting premise is that it's a volunteer outfit because that was a common thing that happened in the Civil War, is that a call would go out, they'd put out posters and stuff, and then sort of rich people or people with influence would like sponsor a regiment instead of like what we do today, and they would like get all the
There's no
volunteers.
draft?
Yeah, well, there was a draft, but it seemed to be foot soldiers, but like these elite, what we would call elite units, the cavalry and stuff. They would they'd be sponsored by so and so, and they'd all get together and they would buy the uniforms and everything. I think that's sort
like
of
a baseball team?
yeah, sort of like a baseball team. That's
Yeah.
was
With a little
like
higher
I'm
stakes.
trying to remember. It was Custer. I thought was he raised a regiment at one point and he designed the uniforms and everything. And,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was pretty
Wow.
interesting thing. So
The interesting thing about this particular book was that these two guys and his company, or his unit of men, they took time off from college, and it was a big risk back then, because the college professors and the president of the colleges, they frowned on it. So they, even though they were very patriotic and the patriotism was there, they said, we don't agree
necessarily
with it.
support this. Yeah.
Exactly. So these
Yeah.
two guys didn't know whether they were going to be able to go back to college.
Yeah.
So it was a risk that they took. So that kind of sparked me a little bit as I was reading into it. Like, boy, what a risk.
It was. Well, besides the risk of getting shot and killed, it was
Yeah.
like it wasn't like the casualty rates were really high.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you fought from a distance. They got really close in and really duped it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, how much of it was, and you said you researched it, so how much of it was like, how much research were you actually able to find like hardcore facts about what they were doing, and how much did you have to kind of extrapolate?
So the main character actually wrote a book
Okay.
back in the 1880s about his experiences. So Sam Pettingill, Grafton, wrote this book called The Grafton Cavaliers. And it was a book back in the 1880s. It was a very small book. And it was about his adventures with this unit, with this company of men. It was a really great book, and I was able to get a lot of information from it. It is historical fiction, but it's based on true facts. So a lot of the information in the book are all true, which was really kind of cool. When you read something in the Grafton Cavaliers, then you would go and research that, Google it, and there's a ton of information out there. So it was really, really interesting. And I will be honest with you, the two characters are the only Grafton people that were in this unit. But I had no idea, and I'm only surmising, that they were close in age, number one, but closeness as in friendship from childhood. And I never knew that. But even up until the day that these two men died in their late 80s, they were best friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that they both survived. Because
Yeah,
they
again,
did.
talking about casualty rates, that's kind of just, the odds were not in their favor for them to both go off and both come back.
Exactly. And these two guys were part of this unit of men, this company of men that were surrounded. So when they were in Harper's Ferry has these long, steep cliffs around it, and Harper's Ferry's down in the bottom of it. And these people, or these soldiers, and also some infantry that was there, they had 12,000 men in Harper's Ferry that were surrounded by the Confederates.
Wow.
So they were thinking that they were going to be captured and sent to a prison, not Andersonville at the time, but probably Libby prison or somewhere in Virginia. And if you can imagine these college kids having
20 something.
exactly
Yeah.
early
At
20s,
best, yeah.
and they had to learn how to ride a horse.
Really?
You know, they had no idea, especially Wilder. In my research, it made reference to Wilder, who is one of the characters, had a difficult time learning how to ride a horse.
Because
not
not
only
thinking that they would grow up on a farm, that they'd be like, oh yeah, that's how you got around.
that's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
It
No.
wasn't. And they, imagine these horses that were
Yeah, they were.
feisty.
Yeah.
So they had to learn that, and then 12,000 men that were going to surrender. And these two guys, in their company of men, again, college students, they devised a plan that they were not going to surrender. They did not want to go with the rest of them. And they devised a plan for an escape. And it was one of the most daring escapes
Oh,
in the
interesting.
Civil War.
Yeah.
But I won't tell you how they
Well,
came
yeah,
up.
I know we don't want to spoil the
Spoiler
suspense
alert,
here,
spoiler
but
alert.
now we have to all get it so we can figure it out.
It was pretty, what they did was just really exciting. Exciting.
So you mentioned, I read a little review of the book, and you mentioned that part of your motivation for writing the book was that students, and I'm just going to quote, students need to understand the importance of their community, and learning about the place that they are part of can sometimes be an eye-opener. Was that kind of like your main motivation, was to engage, your main motivation to engage your students?
Yeah, or the reader in general. I really felt, and as being a teacher in a small town of Grafton for as long as I was, that it was really important for students to understand the importance of their town that they are part of. In Grafton, I always promoted the history of it and what's in that town and what's left in that town. So I feel it's really important through these stories that students understand that there is a lost history that some people have forgotten about because of not researching it as in depth as what I've done. So place-based education is huge in my book for all communities.
Because you can then talk to someone and say where they live could have been where someone else grew up, or at
Exactly.
least close to it. They might drive the school bus by Samuel's house or something like that.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story at the end. When I came on last year with you guys, we talked a little bit about the messenger boy and the story behind it with my mom and how it all came to be. And it was, as you said at the time, it was a little goosebumply. I've got another story similar, doesn't include my mom, with this one that you'll go, you got to be kidding me. So I'll tell you at the end if you can leave
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Oh, certainly.
All right, certain.
So I think it's also important, I mean, it must engage the students more. Like history can be kind of dry, kind of boring, because it's like, that happened so long ago. How can kids kind of relate to that? But just the nature of of it being told as a story about people that, can seem more real. Like, it just seems like that's a much better way to teach history.
Absolutely. I'm a big one with folklore. I'm a big one with storytelling. Kids learn, I find that they learn a lot through stories, and they can surmise and become almost forensic detectives throughout the story and envision. When I read this book and the last one with my students at Kern Hatton, of course, at the end of the story, they all want to go and visit Grafton. And they have a vision of their heads, in their minds, of what Grafton is like and what these guys went through, down in Harper's Ferry. So I try to be very descriptive with my writing so that you do see it and the kids will be able to learn from it and not really even see themselves as learning something. But the word Harper's Ferry and Winchester and cavalry and all of these different Civil War terms, they go, I already knew that just by reading.
Yeah, right. Where any other kid who wasn't exposed to that will be, what's going on?
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
I think it's a cool one that really gets them going. And at the very end, there is a twist. With the messenger boy at the end, I just created this story, and the ending, I must have had a great many people say, why did you do that? Holy cow, I never saw it coming. And this one, in the same way, they go, I just didn't see it coming. After
Well, that's
two or
good, yeah.
Yeah,
That's great.
It keeps them going.
So do you have any plans for a third book? Is there?
It's
It's already. I can
done.
see the wheels turning. Oh, it's already done.
It is. Well, I should say it's 2 chapters away from being done.
That's great.
The editor person who is my right arm with these books, Pat Jaworski out in Grafton, last year we started doing a book 3. She asked me if I was going to, and I said, with book 2, there are 2 people that I mentioned. And those people were all actually mentioned in book 1. I said, I would love to do a book 3 just to promote these people, just to promote what they did. So the third one, and Dr. Letman was at one of the talks that I did down in the square, and I said to him, book 3 I want to do on the medical men of Grafton.
Oh, wow.
So there were 2 that were medical. One was a doctor from Grafton. Do you remember Mrs. Gerosia?
Yes.
So her ancestors.
She's actually related to me.
Exactly.
Really? So
She
it's
is.
your ancestors.
So her ancestors, Dr. Park, because she was a Park.
Yes.
That's
on
the third
on my
one.
mom's side, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I'm doing that one, and it's done except for like 2 chapters. And I'm waiting for Pat to come back, and then we'll put it together probably this summer. So it should be
Nice.
fun.
So here's my question: when you were a graduate of Bells Falls Union High School, did you ever foresee that this would be something that you would be doing?
Absolutely not. absolutely not. But I'll tell you that two people that were teachers of mine in the Bellows Falls Union High School, three people, were a big influence on book one that really got me going. One was Linda Felch.
Mrs. Felch, yeah.
Mrs. Felch, she was an English teacher, and I sent her the manuscript of my book one.
Did you?
I did, and she actually wrote back to me. This was a million years ago. The second person was John McAuliffe,
I was going to guess it would be
who
Mr. McCullough.
typed
for
it,
Sure. Yeah.
and Franny Coyne was, he was instrumental in talking to me about it. So did I see myself as doing that? No, not even in the wildest dreams.
But now you have a passion for it. You already have the third book done.
Well, it's a passion about the history.
Yeah.
It's a passion about trying to get the word out there in a creative, innovative way that's exciting so that people would read and say, wow, Grafton. I mean, that's my main goal, is to promote Grafton's history.
But the thing I liked about, I haven't read the second book yet, but the thing I really liked about the first book was it was really real. It wasn't like, oh, gung-ho, here we go. It was like, well, I'd like to go, but no, I can't go. And, these things are happening at home. And if we do this, then we can't do that. And I really found that an interesting part of the whole, because I think people see, at least I grew up in the 60s, so it was the 100-year anniversary of the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned all about the battles and everything, and it was, but you never really got to the down to the people level. And I think that's really different, because people think it's like, oh, there's these big battles, but there was a lot of conflict. It was, like you said, it wasn't, the college professors didn't necessarily support the war. They were like, nah, that's not, and that was throughout both the North and the South. It wasn't like this, two really. It was like there were a lot of people in the middle saying, no, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. One of the things that was hard about writing both books was trying to give the personality image of each character. So each character, when you read the book, the reader kind of understands the character because of what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
In real life, you go, was the person that way?
Yeah.
Henry Spring. You go, was he that way? I actually met the ancestors of Henry Spring. I contacted them.
Uh-huh.
And that was a mind blower, because when I met this older gentleman, Dan Spring and his wife, for a brief couple of seconds, and he didn't know it, neither did she, but I was analyzing the guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm looking at him, I'm like, so these are some of the characteristics of Henry. And I'm looking at the facial, because there's no picture of Henry Spring. And I'm looking at the picture, and or in my mind, I'm going, and the way that he talked, and how subtle he was, and so professional, but very, outgoing. I said, well, that's the way I kind of brought that character into it. And I try to do the same with these guys, is to give a personality of them. And of course, with Pat's help, kind of got
really
it out
worked
there.
out.
Yeah.
Good.
So what's
Yeah.
your story? I'm curious.
As to
Oh, yeah, we're getting to our last
my
5
story.
minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
So-
What's your story, Tom? No.
this
What's the
character,
story?
this one's absolutely mind blowing. But this character, Sam Pettingill, I wanted to find where he died, the house that he died in. In Grafton, he left Grafton in his late 80s to go to Saxon's River to live with his deceased brother, who was a doctor, with his 2 children, who were women at the time, not married. So I was like, I want to find this house in Saxon's River. So I was doing work there at Tim Clark's. He's a teacher at the high school, but he was a teacher at Kern Hatton. So I'm at Tim's house, and I'm like, I got to find this house. We walked around Saxon's River looking for this house, because I had an image of it from the museum in Grafton.
Oh.
We looked everywhere, couldn't find it. Not even close. Came back to his house, and I was like, all right, so let's go over the work that we're going to do in his own house. And he goes, probably the house that he died in, maybe it had a fire, or it was remodeled, or,
Yeah.
similar
Yeah.
to mine, he
Yeah.
said. Mine, the roof came off, and back in the 50s, there was a fire, and we're standing in front of his house, and he's explaining it to me, and I went, no way. The bay window was a dead giveaway. His house is where my character died. So I'm working in his house for 4 weeks where my character actually died. And then the kicker, I said, I got to find out about these 2 caregivers. One of the caregivers, a Pettingill, teacher at Kern Hatton Homes.
Oh, wow.
Ah,
That's just freaky.
yeah.
Freaky universe.
Pretty
wasn't it,
cool.
small
Tommy?
universe, yes.
Small world.
Yes.
It really is a small world when you think about it.
Yeah.
And also the forces that are leading you kind of, because, I mean, what are the odds?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, for 4 weeks, I'm walking around this guy's house, doing work, putting in windows, doing a back room, floor over, and I'm like, this is where my main character, unknown to me,
Yeah.
died. And the 2 caregivers, one of them was a teacher, and the girls, Kern Hatton, which at the time was boys, but a teacher at Kern Hatton Homes. How do you figure?
Yeah, and was so long ago, like I would have thought, maybe it did burn down, or maybe,
Exactly.
it's like, because so much changes, and, it's just
He
amazing.
went and Tim actually, after I left, I go, it's got to be the house, the bay window. It's a dead giveaway.
Did you go and research it?
I didn't even get out of Saxon's River. And he goes, just looked at my deed, Dr. Pettingill's house.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Ah, that is so amazing.
Wow, that's so cool.
So if people want to get a hold
yeah, we
of
got
your
it.
book, where can they get
There's
it
the
from?
cover. There's the cover.
At the bookstore in Bellows Falls
Okay.
or the museum. You can write to the Grafton Museum.
Well, look at that.
I know, look at what we have,
Look at how
we got-
organized
Wow.
our front
When
is.
you were teaching Alex, did you ever think that he would have these abilities?
I
I mean, it's incredible.
it's
He's
amazing.
It's amazing, isn't
You know?
it? He has come so far.
It's a complete 360.
But he has not come so far as to go to any of his reunions.
I
on
heard
alumni
that.
Weekend.
I think it might even be a
Alex.
720.
I think if there were people that actually wrote to him or sent him an email,
Yeah.
I
I
think
think Alex,
like-
we want you. at
Right.
the
Years,
reunion.
Who knows?
You think after 20 years,
someday he might be
Let
the
it
Grand
go.
Marshal. Who knows?
who knows? Alex.
And I think,
Marshall Alex.
I think we
I
are
know.
running
We're just
out of time.
out of time.
Because
But
I started this a little late.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Tommy.
yeah, thanks.
My pleasure.
It's
Thank you.
always fun having you on. Please come back again.
Well, maybe next year.
Okay,
We'll-
sounds
we'll
good.
Book
Next-
in for alumni weekend.
Just
Yeah,
alumni
exactly.
weekend. You're our alumni weekend guest.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank
Sounds
you,
fun.
and see you, Bellows Falls. We may have a new manager. We don't know yet, but whatever.
I don't know. No word on the street yet.
Nope.
That's it, folks, for the feed. Be sure to catch us every Wednesdays at 7:30 a.m. Also, find us on Facebook at Fact TV or tell us what you think. thefeed8@gmail.com. And don't forget to watch the feed online at www.fact8.com.